On that day, I was the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division. This is before they had Homeland Security Department. And so the responsibility for dealing with terrorism fell on the Department of Justice and the FBI. And as I was driving into work and I had my phone on, I was talking to my deputy. He said a plane hit the World Trade Center. And I thought maybe it was probably a small plane pilot who had gotten confused. But as we talked a few minutes later, he said a second plane hit, and then we knew this was an attack. So almost immediately, we went over to the FBI Operations Center, where the center of response was going to be located. As we went over, we heard about the plane hitting the Pentagon. And also we learned about the fourth plane, which had been hijacked. And at the FBI, we spent that day and many days afterward trying to stop more attacks from coming. We ran down quickly who the hijackers were by looking at the manifests and relying on some of the information people phoned in from the airplanes before they crashed. And we were able to rather quickly determine that it was probably bin Laden's people at Al-Qaeda. And then we tracked all the connections through financial transactions and communications to see who else was out there that was potentially a danger.
Why did you think it was bin Laden? Because of the connections back in 1993 when the North Tower, I think, had been targeted, hadn't it, by Ramzi Youssef?
Correct. It was 1993. Also, in the mid-90s, there was actually a plot, I think, called Bojinka, to blow up airliners in the Philippines. That was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But as we also looked at the names on the manifests, and we began to look at how they paid for their tickets and what their communications network was, we were pretty able to trace it back to people who were known Al-Qaeda members. And so within a matter of hours, we had a strong connection that we could use to make further judgments.
It took less than a month for the president to take action with Operation Enduring Freedom. What do you remember about that?
Well, we knew that the attack had come from Al-Qaeda, which was based, they were headquartered in Afghanistan, that the Taliban had refused to turn bin Laden over, and that therefore, if we didn't extract the Taliban from control over Afghanistan, and if we didn't chase down bin Laden, they would be using it as a platform for further attacks. And so rather quickly, we went in and we succeeded in dislodging the Taliban. And when we arrived and started to push them back, we discovered training camps and even laboratories where Al-Qaeda was working on trying to develop biological and chemical weapons.
How long did you expect Operation Enduring Freedom to last?
Well, I don't know that I had a clear expectation. I think we were very successful up front initially. The challenge is always what happens after you win? What's the end game? And I think there, perhaps we were caught a little bit flat-footed in not having a clear sense of the ability to build a cohesive, stable, and peaceful society in the place of the Taliban. And I think a lot of the problems we had in the succeeding 20 years were problems establishing a governance system and a rule of law in Afghanistan that could really lay down roots.
What do you think President Bush would have thought about the decision by President Trump that was then activated by President Biden to pull out of Afghanistan in such a dramatic fashion to coincide with the anniversary of 9/11?
Well, I think it was always understood or expected that at some point the mission would be concluded. I think the deal that the Trump administration struck was not a good deal for America. It was kind of a rush deal to find a fig leaf to cover withdrawal. And that's kind of what President Biden was stuck with when he came into office. I do think, though, that we could have done a somewhat better job in staging our withdrawal, even if it meant reopening the deal or the negotiation with the Taliban. But I think at this point, we have the opportunity to basically say to the Taliban, if you want to cooperate with us, we can find some way to be useful to your effort to establish a government. But if you want to go back to the bad old days, we will come down with a lot of force.
I spoke to the former National Security Advisor, John Bolton. He was on my breakfast program last week, and he says that in his opinion, the United States is in greater danger now than it was before 9/11. Would you concur with him?
I would not agree with that. I mean, I think in terms of dealing with large-scale terrorist attacks, we've built a very effective infrastructure to prevent international terrorists from duplicating a 9/11. And some of your viewers will remember August 2006, when we worked with the British government to disrupt a plot to blow up a dozen airliners flying out of Heathrow Airport to North America. So I think our infrastructure of defense is much better. I do think what's happened is the internet has given the extremists more ability to reach into our own countries and find sympathetic people who would then be willing to carry out smaller scale attacks. And that's challenging because it's not as easily detected as a large scale plot. Additionally, we're now facing domestic terrorist issues, which further create a multiplicity of challenges for the security community.
Okay. Mr. Chertoff, we must leave it there, but thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
And my condolences to all who lost loved ones.